Hey, Halagobe here. I know a lot of you are waiting to play this game, and so I wanted to make some content you can enjoy during that time. Today's topic is on the combat basics of Endfield, and I'll make a full, much more detailed guide for release. So with this, you can already start thinking of what teams you might cook up, or for newcomers, see if you even like the combat systems. Like and sub for tons more Endfield content, and let's check it out. First off, the super basics. Your team is composed of 4 operators. You can swap to the operator on the right by pressing the swap operator key, but you can also swap to a specific operator with their specific keybind, which on PC are your F1 to F4 keys. You will on-field one of your operators, but the other 3 still remain on the field passively. They'll use their basic attack strings against enemies and will also participate in fight mechanics like dodging big explosions. It is pretty funny though to see them get whacked by a boss. Now, operators are split up by class and by damage type. We have 6 classes: Guard, Vanguard, Caster, Defender, Striker, and Supporter. These have their own role in a fight, with Vanguards, for example, being specialists in regenerating skill points for your team to perform deadly battle skills with, and Supporters are good at crowd control or buffing and supporting your team. And then we have 5 damage types: Physical, Heat, Electric, Cryo, and Nature. Technically, we have a 6th, but we can't access it yet. Now, each type has its own unique infliction you can apply, as well as a special effect you can trigger when mixing with other elements. And Physical specifically mostly combos with itself in an interesting way we'll see later. And so every operator has their own unique set of abilities. They each have their own basic attack string. They have their own battle skill. They also have a combo skill, and finally an ultimate. Basic attacks are easily spammable and will be mostly what you do during burst downtime. The operator that you control will also be able to unleash a final strike at the end of their basic attack string. Now, your battle skill requires these skill points, or SP, to be used. On PC, you activate these by pressing 1, 2, 3, or 4, activating the skill of whichever operator is placed in that slot in your team order. But you can use anyone's skills even if they're not the operator you are currently controlling. Battle skills are generally quite strong since they are constrained to this SP mechanic rather than having a cooldown, of which 100 SP must be consumed to activate operator skills, for now at least. 100 SP is the equivalent of one whole bar that shows up on our UI here, so we can hold a maximum of 300 SP. And combo skills are a unique system where you must fulfill a condition in order to activate them, and once activated, they get put on a cooldown that you can see above your operators in the bottom left. So, for example, Chen requires a stack of Vulnerable to be applied onto an enemy. Once applied, she can perform her combo skill, which applies Lift. Harlika's combo triggers if an ally performs a final strike. Now she can deal some damage and apply a debuff to the enemy. And someone like Embers triggers if your controlled operator is simply attacked, healing your operator back up after a nasty hit. Combo skills create a large part of your team's synergy, and creating a team with synergistic and easily chainable combos will not only be super satisfying, but also be super strong. And of course, we finally have ultimates, which can be used by holding the battle skill ability key of the operator. And just like battle skills, we can use our ultimates regardless of who is currently being controlled. These bad boys require a full ultimate energy bar to be activated, and every operator has a different cost, but these can also be super strong. Laevatain, for example, enhances her basic attacks and battle skill for a set duration. Pogranichnik summons shield guards that group up enemies and then proceed to slam dunk them further when fulfilling its conditions. So, how do we get our battle resources? Well, skill points first are required in a bunch of different ways. There is first a natural passive amount that is generated during combat, and if you're outside of combat, your SP will regenerate very quickly up to a cap of 200 SP. Then in combat, you can generate SP through first, final strikes, aka that final basic attack sequence of your controlled operator. If perfect dodging an enemy attack, a bit of SP is also gained. And if performing a finisher on a staggered enemy, a mechanic that will be explained just after, a large amount of SP is recovered. But outside of universal SP mechanics, some operators do just have SP refund or generation in their kit or potentials, like the Administrator themselves even does. Not to mention that the whole Vanguard class is based around generating a ton of SP, much like they are based around DP in the original game. So slotting in one of these can help a ton if you want to spam out battle skills. And there is finally also a gear set that gives SP, and I imagine there will be other sources in the future. As for ultimate energy, this can be gained by performing either battle skills or combo skills. A battle skill on any operator generates energy for everyone, whereas a combo skill instead generates energy for the character that activated it. Some characters will also have additional ways of generating energy, like Laevatain generating a third of her whole ultimate from this additional attack during her battle skill. And just like other games, ultimate gain efficiency is a stat we can stack if we want to generate our ultimate as soon as possible. So we know all these ability types and how to use them, how to gain their resources, but what do they actually do? Well, alongside doing damage, nearly every skill inflicts something called Stagger. Enemies in fact have a stagger bar, much like other games, that will be stacked up through damaging abilities and final strikes. And once it hits its cap, the enemy will no longer be able to move for a certain period of time. During this, your first basic attack on the enemy will also transform into a very hard-hitting and SP regenerating finisher attack, and the enemy also receives more damage multiplicatively to everything else during this stagger period. And sometimes we do just do damage and stagger, but more often than not we also interact with Arts, the elemental system of this game. Heat, cryo, nature, and electric can be inflicted onto enemies when your ability states so. Fluorite skill, for example, will apply nature infliction after a short duration. But what does that do exactly? Well, there are two things that can then happen from an infliction. If you reapply the same element, you trigger an Arts burst, which does a little bit of damage. But if you apply a different element, you instead cause a reaction which has a unique effect. The way reactions work is every element has its own one, and the way to get to it is to first apply any element different from itself, and then apply said element. So, if I want combustion, the heat reaction, I need to apply cryo, nature, or electric, and then heat. So, combustion, which is heat's reaction, does a burst of damage and then applies damage over time. Electrification, electric's reaction, shocking right, does damage and then applies a debuff that makes the enemy take more Arts damage for a period of time. Corrosion, nature's reaction, does some damage and then makes the target gradually lose resistance over time, aka also amplifying your damage. And finally, solidification, cryo's reaction, again does damage, but will also make the target temporarily unable to move. What's neat is that the more art inflictions you stack up before causing a reaction, the more powerful the reaction will be. If I stack up 3 heat and then use an electric for electrification, the enemy will take more damage, and the debuff will be stronger, and it will be longer. And some characters can forcibly apply reactions without even mixing arts, like Ardelia, who can apply corrosion with her battle skill. But you might be wondering, where's physical then? Well, before we move on to physical, it does technically interact with cryo. When an enemy has solidification, applying any of the physical status effects will consume solidification and trigger shatter, which has a very high multiply value and actually deals physical damage rather than cryo. So overall, we can see that combustion and solidification's shatter are damage-oriented reactions, whereas corrosion and electrification are supportive-oriented reactions. But physical also has its own unique system that interacts with itself. There are 5 physical statuses that you can apply to enemies. First, the basic vulnerable effect that some operators just apply in their kit by itself. But every physical status up next can also apply vulnerable, and it can stack up to 4 times. So then, you have 2 stack-based physical statuses and 2 control effect ones. Crush and Breach, like said before, can apply a stack of vulnerable. Now, if the enemy is already vulnerable, either of these 2 effects will consume all vulnerable stacks and gain power depending on this number. Crush will deal more damage based on the stacks, and Breach will make the target take more physical damage for a certain duration, both scaling on the stacks consumed. An example of Crush is the Endmin's battle skill, and an example of Breach is Pogranichnik's battle skill. Lift and Knockdown instead can interrupt enemies and deal stagger, but what's also interesting is that they don't consume vulnerable. So instead of using Breach, for example, and consuming stacks, maybe you could apply Lift, which adds a vulnerable stack, and then Breach later for more potency. Either way, the reaction system is very cool, and the game's only getting started. There are specific things I will reveal more about it on release in the proper guide, but I don't want to bore you with details if you can't even play the game yet. But reactions and inflictions in general are very important for characters, and a lot of combo skills can trigger off of applying them or even consuming them. So we have Stagger, skill points, combo skills, ultimates, final strikes, dodges, arts inflictions, arts reactions, and more. The game has a lot of combat mechanics to offer, and it's only patch 1. I expect crazy kits to come eventually, and maybe even a kit that lets us use a whole new damage type like Ether that some enemies can inflict already. Let me know what team you plan to use on release based on this combat knowledge. Thanks for watching, and have a Goba day.